Okay, let's get started. Hi everyone and welcome to the 7th episode of the Data Fam Community Jam. My name is Sarah Bartlett. I'm a Tableau Zen Master, a Tableau Social Ambassador, founder of IronQuest and co-leader of the London Tableau User Group. I'm also a co-organizer of the Data Fam Community Jam, which is a collaboration between Tableau and the Tableau Fringe Festival. I want to give a big shout out to my fellow organisers, Emily Kund, Kevin Flerledge, Lorna Brown, Alex Wolchek, and Jordan Scott from Tableau. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you today, featuring 4 females and Simon. But I just want to run through some housekeeping items with you first before we begin. So please use the chat to chat with other attendees. Feel free to add into the chat where you're from. We'd really love to see where you're from in the world. And also, if you have a question, please add it into the Q&A. So not in the chat, make sure your questions go in the Q&A. The speakers and myself and the other co-organisers will be reviewing the Q&A. At the end of each talk, I'll ask one of the speakers one question, and the rest of the questions will be answered in the Q&A box directly. The session is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with you after the event by email. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speakers, Simon Beaumont and Fee Gordon. Simon and Fee both work at Jones Lang LaSalle, or JLL as it's commonly known, and they lead an innovative and agile centre of excellence built around people. Simon is a Tableau Zen Master and Ambassador, while Fee is an Alteryx Ace and a Tableau Ambassador. And Fee's joining us all the way from Sydney, Australia, so it's really late for her, so I'm really grateful that she was able to join us today. Over to you two.
Thanks, Sarah. We'll just see if my colleague can get his stuff together and share his screen. Here we go.
Great. Thanks, Simon.
Hey, you're on mute, mate.
Simon, you're not sharing your slides anymore.
So my other PC just broke, so I just need to get it working again. Sod's law. Sorry, guys, it won't be a minute.
That's all right. So Sarah, while we're filling some time in here, I've seen some really interesting things getting submitted on the IronQuest this month.
Yeah, it's been crazy. So I think this is going to be the biggest month yet. So we've already got over 30 submissions. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, so clearly people want to track quantified self-data in lockdown. So it's great.
and even without the thought of being able to aim towards IronViz this year, I mean, it'll be interesting. Yeah. Do you know, have you got any inside goss on whether
I don't know. Let's watch this space. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do, because obviously with both conferences going virtual, who knows. But yeah, keep doing IronQuest until we know more. That's all I can say.
And are there any standout visualizations that really come to mind that people should go and have a look at on Twitter that you've seen so far?
Yeah, they're just coming in so quickly, right? So there's been a few this week from different mothers, so talking about motherhood. So there was one from Katie where she spoke about the number of times she basically tracked the first month of her child's life, so tracking the number of feeds, number of nappy changes, which is obviously really lovely to see, and it gives you a real insight into what it's like having a newborn.
I don't know that I'd really like to track the number of nappy changes. I
know, right? But you need to track this stuff. If they're not going enough times, it could be a problem. But anyway, there was another one by Agatha that looked at the number of times her children said "mummy" or "mum" during the day, and that was just really crazy because I think I was over 30 times in some cases. So yeah, right. Simon's got it working.
Hopefully that's working. Sorry about that. Can you see my PowerPoint slide, Sarah?
We can, yeah.
Certainly, mate.
Thank you for your patience.
No worries.
Cool. So welcome everyone to Structure, Consistency and Speed, how we within JLL architect our Viz guidelines.
We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Making meaningful and long-lasting changes in life depends on your ability to form and execute new goal-achieving activities consistently enough that they become habitual. One thing you need to take away today: provide structure, consistency, and speed through Viz guidelines, and embed them in your organisation by building great habits. Meet the dream team from JLL. We sit on opposite ends of the globe and collaborate to enable our hundreds of analysts to help people see and understand data. My colleague, Simon Beaumont, well known in the Tableau community, Zen Master, SportsViz Sunday lead, is our super special Centre of Enablement Director at JLL. Simon's outstanding visualization skills and passion for people shines as he develops programs that forge step changes in our capabilities. And I must say, including my own.
Cheers, Fee. And then there's Fee. Alteryx Ace, Tableau Ambassador, always dreaming big, influencing and leading us to discover new wonderful ways that provide the architecture and foundation for a new wave of business intelligence. She's got a passion for data, people, and quite occasionally steak. Fee cooks up crazy ideas that JLL empowers us to deliver.
Now consider the kaleidoscope and colour and design on your Tableau server. It's quite the overwhelming sensory avalanche for the general population who rely on insight. We had the same, and slowly we're unpicking it. Somewhat like that awful packed bubble chart popping up on my Tableau public account. And the way we do this is through design standards and our Viz guidelines. We weave it into our operating model with training, practice, and feedback sessions.
And just to put everyone's mind at rest, that was part of Andy Kirk's worst Viz ever challenge, so it's kind of deliberately done for the Pat Bubble, so we will forgive Fee.
Thanks, Simon. So there's 3 reasons why we use guidelines at JLL: consistency, reduced effort, and brand recognition. For consistency, our business intelligence teams showcase their data visualization expertise through uniform design. Our stakeholders know intuitively which visualizations provide interactivity, or even where to find their filters, and this forms habits. We also have reduced our effort for deployments. We save time through leveraging the standards with best practice design methodology for every dashboard we create. For example, when COVID hit, we needed to understand our position. So a dashboard was created within 4 hours. The formatting and design was easy. All we needed to do was cycle through the data to find the story and position the insights. Finally, brand recognition is important because it creates trust in the data, which increases our end users' confidence.
So let's give you a little bit of history and go back 18 months. In JLL, we've always had a strong and well-established passion for data, a commitment to empower analysts to achieve their potential through giving them access to agile, effective tools such as Tableau and Alteryx. 18 months ago, we made our first bold steps towards connecting our Tableau analysts, all 750 of them. The outcome was a successful one: positive user feedback, engaged analysts, and even publication of the standards on our new JLL Tableau public account. But this was just the start of the journey. It fostered numerous conversations that would further transform our approach to analytics.
So when I came on board with JLL about 20 months ago, I was blown away by the team's delivery of the guidelines. It was beyond my wildest dreams in terms of the content that it provided. Now, I'm lucky to collaborate with people who want things to be better. And Simon invited me to share my thoughts. And while there was so much to like, there were also areas that could be refined. For instance, pre-attentive attributes are critical to help people see and understand data. They are the primer, the oil. They slick the information so it slides down those neural pathways. And while Simon and I agreed on the palette, the paint swish, which was in our title bar, took a little convincing though. But more about that later.
We've deliberately staggered delivery into 4 stages. Guidelines are a long-term evolving project that requires care, influencing, and thought leadership. During our session today, we'll touch on each of the topics with the intention that you can steal like an artist the ideas and deliver a similar program within your organisation. And first up, our new colour palette. Approaching our global brand team, we taught them about neuroscience, how pre-attentive attributes can help guide users through an analysis. It was a meeting of minds, people who adore colour. Our global head of brand, Cara Keogh, agreed to sponsor our work to get a new palette that she would endorse for use across the organisation. And the great data community helped us select Set Reset as the partner to help us deliver that. Working with the Set Reset team, who were well known for their data visualization and colour projects, we got to work. It was important for us to enable everyone to see and understand data with ease. Part of our brief to Set Reset required an accessible colour palette. They also compared our existing palette versus competitors, and initially proposing 3 different palettes, and through a number of iterations, we agreed on the final release. And it delivered us a categorical, sequential, diverging, and highlight, lowlight colour functionality. And next on our programme, we looked at redesigning the standards that we had successfully implemented 18 months ago.
So in today's session with you, we're touching on 4 key areas of the Viz guidelines. Starting out with format. JLL, Tableau is our strategic data visualization tool. So we chose to deliver our Viz guidelines in Tableau. It helped us to demonstrate the recommended structures and techniques. Now, are you curious about the topics that we've covered? We'll share what's important to us to help our dashboards pop. You'll see our template, which will give you some insight into our design. And finally, you'll see some of the community who have created content that we provide to our teams to give them access to great techniques.
Our standards aren't just a prescriptive template, and that's a really important point to note. Ever since our first steps into the standards, it was all about people. We wanted to inform and inspire, and more importantly, for people not to fear change, but to embrace it. There had to be a recognition that standards would be there as an enabler for people to succeed, not a diktat to create robots or a report factory. Here you can see our Viz guidelines in Tableau. It made sense for the whys and the hows of the guidelines to be in the same format as the what, our template. Our teams can point and click, open up demo Vizes, and reverse engineer how the techniques are applied. The look and feel adopts many of our Viz techniques described in the guidelines. The topics in our guidelines cover elements from design principles and layouts, the use of containers and padding, all the way through to formatting and filters. We encourage design discipline. Our guidelines are not designed to prescribe a certain chart type in a dashboard or a particular layout of chart. We give the analysts complete freedom of how they apply their content to the Viz standards. For example, a dashboard could be a landscape or it could be long form. But what we do insist on is the user experience is consistent, driven by themes and concepts from within the standards. And now this is a Tableau community event, so we might treat you with a bit of Tableau. So let me just jump in to Tableau. And hopefully, Fee, can you just confirm you can see Tableau desktop?
Yep, that's up now.
Cool. So some elements of our visualization standards may appear simplistic, but just like a good bar chart, often it is the most simplistic things that make the biggest impact on people. And this was the case with our triangles, our dashboard Toblerones. A visual prompt to symbolize when user-driven activity is available in the dashboard. So just alongside the titles here, you'll see different colored triangles, purple, gray, and orange, And that represents different click actions, so filter, highlight, or URL actions that users can action from within the dashboard. Also, you've got footers that inform you when the data was last updated, a common question that's regularly asked, but unless you make it obvious for people, they'll continue to reach out to their analysts to prompt and ask. And also dashboard background information, available within an interactive eye icon, which is simple as just a shape, and it provides background in terms of the workbook description, data sources, version numbers, and business owner. And lastly, we also utilize advanced Tableau functionality. So when users want to drill down and expand a dimension, they can do it through an intuitive plus button. So click on plus on chairs and the dashboard expands. Simple functionality that uses set actions, but from an end user point of view makes a massive difference. No Sankeys, no core diagrams, just start with solid foundations and then let the analysts add the creativity with their charts and analytical creations. And throughout the VID guidelines, we have community blogs on each topic. They have been carefully curated with the best of the best selected from individuals and organizations across the Tableau community. We strongly recommend leveraging the collective cognitive power of the community to learn the slickest techniques or put them into practice with community challenges. And just a genuine heartfelt thank you to the individuals and companies that have taken the time to share their great insights and allowed us to share them within our VID standards.
Curious how we rolled out the guidelines? Listen further. We all love Confucius's observations, but this one is particularly relevant for helping to train people. At JLL, we know that people aren't going to read our guidelines and put them to use. So we've spent time to build a comprehensive training program to roll out across the globe. Our training expects solid Tableau skills, and it's gone through several iterations, developing content, testing it, practicing it, building towards a globally accessible e-learning module. But we do not train how to achieve something. Instead, we train the why. Why we recommend guidelines to enable strong visual communication. We've even got a chatbot for skills review prior to the training. For the actual training itself, we wanted to make the experience less talk, more action. As adults, we learn differently, so we've incorporated techniques to help people learn fast. We have a Visicize book that trainees practice the guidelines, so with a little bit of talking and far more practicing, we guide people through the process. At the end of the training, they complete a final assignment, the capstone project, to build from scratch. So let's take a look at the training in action. Here you can see the typography guidelines. During the training, we give context of why it's important. For example, our aim with typography is to create a consistent experience for our users, where titles, tooltips, and any writing on the dashboard are clear, but not dominant in the visualization. Size, color, boldness, and font are specified alongside case. And the example demonstrates how the text should apply. But rather than read through all of the specifics, we launch straight into putting the techniques into practice. Leveraging concrete experience, creating muscle memory through play on the Visicize. Now I'm sure you are all cringing at the moment at how this visualization looks terrible. The fonts are overwhelming, cluttered, and they dominate. Our people edit the Visicize workbook, remediating all of the bad choices until the dashboard looks clean. And once the Visicize is complete, they can employ reflective observation, where they take the time to absorb the difference between the start of the Visicize to the finished product. This reinforces the importance of how the standards provide consistency and improved user experience. Now, just one thing before we move on. Can you see that paint swish? No. We used AI software from iQuant to prove that it added too much ink to the page. And fortunately, Simon agreed. Now, once the e-learning is complete, there's one final task before graduating, the capstone project. The aim is active experimentation, where trainees apply their learning to a project brief they build from scratch and thus truly learn by doing. So, and if you just want to click, I think it may trigger the page to come through.
Yeah, there you go, Fee.
Now, what you can see here is an overview of the project. They get a complete brief along the way. But the difference between the capstone project and the Visisize workbook is there are no helpful vizzes to start with. What we do is we give them a data set, a brief, a sketch, and some hints. Just flick to the next slide. Thanks. Here you can see our finalized product. On completion of the capstone project, each trainee submits their assignment and gets feedback on their solution. For instance, where aspects are missed or perhaps need refinement. The feedback is critical as it plays into our embed journey where we have Viz peer reviews, which Simon will run you through.
So finally, it's important to us this program is embedded into our op model. And that's where formatting, Viz reviews and challenges come in. So we do formatting reviews and peer Viz reviews. And I'm just going to focus on the Viz reviews within this talk. Viz reviews are not a competition or management assessment of analyst competency. When done well, they can achieve team cohesion, a collaboration that allows everyone to contribute to the successful delivery of new content. We leverage technology to bring together our geographically diverse teams and create a sense of community. And the purpose of a Viz review is to assess the Viz against the original business question and desired insights. It's not about talking about formatting or technical build. Analysts share their content in advance, posting a link on Microsoft Teams. Their peers explore the Viz and consider feedback using a simple structure of questions. I like, then I suggest. The analysts then walk people through the Viz on a WebEx and share the story of the dashboard, the flow, the insights, but as I stress, not the technical build. Feedback is documented on our Microsoft Teams site, discussed during a meeting, and then analysts can choose what feedback to include to improve on their work. And at JLL, we aim to make it as an enjoyable and energetic place to work as possible. And one way we do this is with our monthly JLL Data Viz Challenge. Inspired by Cole, Nausbanner-Knaflic, and the Storytelling with Data Challenge, we allow our analysts protected time during their working month to develop non-work-based data visualizations around a theme or a particular chart type. Learning through play leads to improvements in our business dashboards. For instance, the embedding of color in titles and subtitles to eliminate the need for color legends. Clear and concise annotations. The list literally goes on and on of techniques that we now apply in our everyday work.
Wrapping up our session today, we want you to take away at least one thing. Provide structure, consistency, and speed by embedding Viz guidelines and building great habits.
Thank you for listening to our journey, and we hope in some small way it will inspire your organisation's approach to analytics. We would genuinely love to hear from you if you've got any questions, any suggestions, or simply want to keep the conversation going. And we are always on the lookout for top talent, so if you're interested in coming and work for us, please reach out. Please do reach out on Twitter, email, or our personal blogs that are listed there. And thank you for your time wherever you are in the world today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Simon and Fee. That was fantastic. It was really good to get an insight into the new Viz guidelines you've got in place at JLL. Just one question that I'd like to ask you live is, how do you ensure that the guidelines are adhered to? So when people publish, say, content to Tableau server, do you vet it in advance or after it's been published, and
Yeah,
how do you manage that?
So that's a really important part of the peer reviews and our pre-release cycle. So all the dashboards go through a peer review, and then also a COE lead will vet as part of our release. So all of our dashboards go up with release notes and user guides, and it's an important part of the QA process. So we're not trying to restrict our analysts, and none of the standards are about restriction. We give the analysts complete freedom, but within a process that ensures that we keep our standards high and our user experience consistent.
Okay, great. There's a few more questions coming in the Q&A, so I appreciate if you can go through those during Annabelle's talk. Thank you. Okay, let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, so next up we have Annabelle. Annabelle is a visuals analyst and leads the Centre of Excellence at Bontobel. She also holds the Tableau Desktop Certified Professional certification. Tableau and dogs are her two passions in life, and she co-leads the Zurich Data Plus Women group in her spare time. Over to you, Annabelle.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Let me share my screen. Yes.
Okay, good to go.
Okay. I'm not so expert than the other guys sharing screen and everything. So yeah, so good morning or good afternoon, depending of your time zone. For some of them, I think it's even the evening. So first I wanted to thank the organizer for inviting me and yeah, to be able to present today like a topic that is very dear to me. And I wanted to add that be part of the Tableau community is very, very close to my heart. It's very important for me. So I will talk today how to increase, or at least try to increase the Tableau adoption in your company. Like Sarah already told, my name is Annabelle Rincon. You already noticed by my beautiful accent that I was born and raised in France. But my parents are Spanish. That's why I have this family name as Rincon. The topic of today is quite dense, so I will not go through every detail. If you want to reach out to me after the session here, it's my information. Otherwise, I will stay a little longer to answer any question that you may have on the Q&A. Yeah, what I wanted to say that, yeah, I'm working from home today, so you may hear from time to time my dog, so let's consider him as my co-speaker. We will have soon a Data Plus Women session, virtual one in Zurich, so stay tuned if you want to learn more about it, because we have very, very nice speaker. So let's get started. So when you want to increase the adoption, the Tableau adoption in your company, you cannot only rely on having a strong server or a nice dashboard or a fun community. No, it's a whole. It's a multi-approach. So here it's a screenshot of the Tableau blueprint for the one that knows about it. Is a lot of, I mean, you have a lot in the Tableau website. It's to explain from deployment to support, analytic best practices, everything, every step that you have to take in order to build this self-service analytic platform. But today we will just focus on some of the topic. So indeed, if you want to increase the adoption on your company, of Tableau on your company, of course, you have to do something that is not very fun, but necessary. It's to monitor what is happening. Monitor the server or the Tableau server or Tableau Online, depending on what you have, or in order to provide a good experience for everyone. You don't want that you, I don't know, you don't want that you, at each click, your people have to wait 20 minutes. No, you want to have a good experience overall. You also have to educate people because you have to develop the skill of your community. If the people know what they are doing and how to use a product, they will enjoy it. They will like it. They will find more insight in the data, and they will share it with others. And that will increase the adoption overall. Good experience are always like a good way to increase the adoption. And the last but not least is the community. Having a community in your company, it's very important. And let's just talk about that a moment. Do you think that Tableau will be such a great tool without this community? Do you think that you will have this event today without it? I don't think so. I mean, it's a main part and it's not take so much time. So let's start with the first point. Is like that you have to monitor the usage and the performance. Like I said, that is not the fun part of my job, but I enjoy doing it, of course, and it's necessary. You have to monitor the Tableau usage. Why? Because if you have a lot of dashboard in your server that are not used, for instance, they are taking place, they are taking performance, and it's not something that you want. What you want is that your dashboard that are there are used and are running well. So you need to check the dashboard that are there. You need to check if something is happening on the server. For instance, if you have like a lot of extract failing, because a lot of people like to use extract, and you will see that a lot of business users, in order to solve all the data issue, will use extract. It's not necessarily a bad thing when it's done without thinking, right? If you have all your extract running at 9 AM, I ensure you that you will have problem, because it's taking a lot of time when people are already using Tableau server. So you have to think about that, check it the one that are taking a long time, maybe to put it during the night, if it's possible. Maybe you can advise them not to do full refresh, but only incremental refresh. And to help you on that task, you have a lot of pre-built visualization views already done on Tableau server for site and server admin. So this one is like a screenshot. Thanks God it's not my server, otherwise I will freak out. That is a pre-built about all the extract. You see here, you have like a lot of error happening in the last 24 hours. Obviously, it's not something that you have to keep on. You have to check what is happening, if it's maybe that the data was not available at this certain time. Maybe it's something else, that the extract is taking so much time that is like just make fail all the other one. You just have to be aware of it, contact your user. It's not very comfortable to do that, but I ensure that at the end, it will increase the user experience and the adoption. Something else that I check is also the performance on the dashboard. We are on self-service analytic platform, so we don't, I mean, people can publish whatever they want. So it's not like Simon and Fee explained on their company, where they have like more or less to sign in. They publish, and after we check. So I have some custom view. That is also something that you can do. With the Tableau server log, you can create your own custom view. I have some of the custom view to check, for instance, what are the dashboards that are not used or not been viewed since more than 300 days, for instance. And this dashboard, I contact the user and I remove them, obviously. I have also like dashboard like this screenshot here that you can see. It's the performances. So each dot match a loading time. So obviously this dashboard, for instance, are taking a long of time. You see here it's like 50 seconds. So this one are more than 100 seconds. So something is happening. And here I have to contact my users and check with them what is happening. If it's the data, that is a live connection and the data was taking a lot of time to charge, if it's something else. And I have to be here at every step for them and advise them in a different way on the structure of the data, of the technology of the data, or even like to read on the dashboard with them in order to provide a better experience. So that was for monitoring. But like I said, you have also to increase the technical usage of your company. and it's essential. If they know what they are doing, they will enjoy, like I said, and they will speak. I have so many users that discover Tableau, have a good experience, and speak and bring other colleagues in the new experience, that it's really amazing. So the way to do it, of course, is if you are like a trainer, an official trainer, you can organize classroom training in your company. Otherwise, you can just like advise them that to take some classroom training. You have a lot of resources also online with webinar, free e-learning videos and everything. We have installed, for instance, in your company, in our intranet page, a list of the webinars, the live webinar to go every month, and we select some of them and we put them on the internet to try to advise our user how to learn new things. I contact also some of my users and say, hey, you have Tableau since, I don't know, 6 months. What is the experience going on? Do you need to have a training? We are organizing in training internally. You know, you have like constantly to go back to your community and try to make them grow. Something I wanted to mention to you, if you don't know yet, it's Tableau have free e-learning for 90 days. I think it's still the case. I checked this morning, and it's quite good. They have different paths in order that you can learn at the beginning of what you want to achieve, right? So you have even a test at the beginning, and it will tell you which path you should take. For instance, if you have to design dashboard, they will probably go through to the designer or the data scientist path. But I also advise you to onboard your boss in this e-learning. So there is one dedicated for executive sponsor, and they will learn what is visual analytics and how to use Tableau server, which it's always good to have like some executive sponsorship. I mean, the dashboard, each time you click, you will go through the URL action. There is a URL action on this dashboard. Something I wanted to mention that is very important, that you have also, it's not good enough to have good dashboard. So after this e-learning and all this material, your user will do good dashboard, but it's not good enough. What you need is, so it's like that they are trained to use Tableau server. It's not so straightforward, but sometimes they don't dare to ask or to ask question, I don't know how to navigate or something like that. Just send me a PowerPoint. That's not what we want. We want that they use Tableau server. So to do that, usually when I demo a dashboard, I always demo how to access, how to explore, how to use the favorite, and how to use all these features, subscribe to a view, set an alert. You can also, of course, it's good to do a demo. You can also have this information on the intranet page. And when you send the URL for a new dashboard, you just also send the guide. I always push my user also to give some, maybe to do a user guide. You see like a little icon explaining what the dashboard is about. Also, you can put subtitle and instruction, click to, filter, click. I mean, you have to guide your user in order that the experience is overall good. I wanted to mention this excellent dashboard for Mark Markborn. I think it's quite good. I suggest all of you to have a look at that. You can, of course, reproduce a dashboard that is similar and have it on Tableau server, on your own Tableau server or Tableau online, but it's very, very good. It's by gaming. So, of course, you have to pass 4 different rooms and you have to answer a question. And the way to answer a question is to play with the dashboard. So the user will learn how to interact with a view, or to filter, or to use a parameter and everything. So I think it's something that doesn't have, you don't have to forget when you want to increase the technical knowledge of your community. What we also do, and that doesn't matter the size of your team, you can have like a mailbox where they can contact you if you have a problem. You can set up doctor Tableau session. What is important is that you help them at every step during their process. And that starts with the onboarding. On the first day that they have the license key, you have to contact them and to guide them in the server on the different options that they have to learn with you. Okay. Yes. On the learning, there is something that you can set up in your own company. It's skill belts. So the skill belt, it's the same thing in karate. You have the white, yellow, green, black belt. Maybe it's not on this order, but the idea is like to make it fun and competitive. What is skill belt? So you will have for each of the level. So here, instead of having a white bell, green bell and everything, I have designed this own icon. So you have newbies, Padawans, apprentice, wizard, and everything, and to dedicate one for prep and for finance, because I'm working in a bank. And you have for each of the level dedicate resources and exercise. So they can, for instance, download the dashboard, try to answer the question, and they have the solution. And I always have, like, for each level also, like dedicated resources with webinar that they should attend, or like a free learning session. And so the two images that you see, the one on the bottom are like a screenshot of the stickers. So we develop stickers. So each time a user finishes a level, they can tag us, and they have a beautiful stickers. And I think that I have somewhere my book. I cannot find it. I will try to find it at the end, where I have all the stickers, so they can put it on their computer, for instance. It's just trying to make it fun and competitive. And on the right, it's a leaderboard skill belt. So this one is a screenshot of the test. That's why you don't have a lot of players. You see, you have only 2 players. And it's calculated, it gives you score depending if you have downloaded the material, if you have access to different sessions. And I have all the material on my Tableau server in dedicated folder. So I think I'm still good in time. The third point, but not least, it's a community. Like I said, Tableau will not be Tableau without the community. I'm sure of that. So you have to try to reproduce this kind of feeling inside your company. And it's important that you provide a fun and an environment, an atmosphere where everyone feels good. That one, that they can, so how you do that? If you're a small team, you can have regular coffee with other people. If you're a bigger team, you can create virtual event or physical event or meeting. In other bigger company, we have regular internal Tableau user group. What is important is just that it's a place where you speak. You can share experience, ask questions to others. You can, of course, develop an intranet page or have a newsletter. The important part of the community, and why it's so important, is that people stay engaged. Because when you onboard people, they are maybe engaged to learn. After some months, maybe they have difficulty. So here where the e-learning and the learning go through. But the community is there at every step. If I have a problem, I can reach someone. I can share good experience. I can find helps. Something that's the little icon that we have developed. It's true that to have like a icon, it's good to have this feeling of belonging to something. The last point that I want to share, that you can organize also some these challenges internal. It's not so complicated, and it's very rewarding to see with one data set what the different people can do. So of course you can just join a lot of already the challenge that are happening outside, the one by Sarah or the Makeover Monday, or you can have your own. So I have done two types of this challenge that work quite well. The first one was two kind. I have done more than two. Was with charities. So it can be Red Cross, it can be a lot of charity, like from from your cities or whatever. And that works quite well, depending of the communities. And even it works very well on my previous job, for instance, because we had the possibility to use some hours to charity work. So we asked to use this charity work time in order to do something for them, an analysis for them. And that worked very well. Another stuff that I did was like a fun challenge, but in order that they also learn something, so the first challenge was about Game of Thrones rating episode. So they have a data set about this, and they have to do a dashboard or a storyline using at least 2 out of the 3 new features of the 2019.2. So it was, they have to use 2 out of set action, parameter action, or this Toodle drill down menu container. And it was very fun. So of course you have to prepare, you have to have the data source, you have to explain the little fields for the Game of Thrones challenge and provide some example from Tableau Public community about some visual about Game of Thrones, explaining what were the new features and how to use it. That's fine, but at least they learned something. And it was the first time for them to use these new features. And starting from that, they starting using it more and more on the dashboard. So we are very proud of them. After you make the participant present their contribution, which is good because everyone is changed to present. And it was a good exercise. And you have to be kind. Huh? Of course, you have to be kind. You have to get a good guidance. That is so obvious. And I mean, we think also about some prices. It doesn't have to be very expensive. It can be a Tableau t-shirt, it can be some book, a bottle of champagne, whatever you want. But it's a good way for them to reward their time. And why I said that it's also, so of course, more than engage yourself, it's also that it's good because I provide always free licenses during this challenge. And the community is just growing thanks to that. And they always, it's fun because they always try, you see, it's kind of a challenge and a competition. And for instance, last time Michele won, and now they are like trying to say, hey, no, I want to win. I want to beat him. So it's kind of funny. Yeah, like in conclusion, we have talked about the 3 pillars of like monitoring, the education, and the community has to set up everything together. There is much more, obviously, to talk about. Yeah, so, I mean, what is really crucial that you assist your user at every step, from start with the onboarding process until the end, to the way up. So thank you very much for listening, and let's continue to speak, and I will be there to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. That was great. It was really insightful to get an idea of what you do at your organization and how you apply those blueprint principles. There's one question that came in that I'm going to ask you live. This is from Yubin. They said they appreciate the idea of tracking usage from end users, so seeing what people are doing. Can you showcase or explain how you set that up in Tableau Server, or like the kind of views that you use to track who's using Tableau?
For the skill belt, you mean, or like?
Just for the general like Tableau usage, like the reports.
Oh, yeah. So you have for this Tableau usage, you have like automatic view in Tableau Server that you can already use. Otherwise, I use the Tableau Server logs, and I have my own. So I have a lot of dashboard running for loading times, the dashboard that are not used since a long time. Yes, I was thinking even like doing like a bad leadership board, you know, like with the worst dashboard ever, the worst usage ever. I restrained myself.
Okay, that's great.
But I have I have the list of the bad guys, like
the good and the bad, like top 5 good to 5 bad, that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up we have Louise. I'll just share my screen with you. So Louise is a certified Tableau trainer and analytics consultant working with Perception Data Consulting in Dublin. Today Louise is going to talk to us about all the new Tableau features, including the buffer calculation. Over to you, Louise.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'll share my screen. So you might let me know if you can't see it coming through, Sarah. So it should be showing now. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's showing.
Hi. Great stuff. Thanks for the introduction, Sarah. And hi, everybody. Annabelle was just mentioning the Tableau community there, and I must say it's really nice. I'm delighted to be part of this event, and it's nice to be able to connect in with people virtually. And thanks so much to all the organisers for your efforts. So the title of my presentation is What's a Buffer Calc When It's at Home? So I'm going to mainly focus on buffers, but I'm also going to talk about other new and newish features. So just quickly, well, Sarah already introduced me. But just so as well as being a certified Tableau trainer, I'm also part evangelist, which means that I go around with big speech bubbles and tell everybody how much I love Tableau. So I'm based in Dublin in Ireland, and I'll be speaking for 20 minutes like the others, and I'm going to be covering the what, the why, and the how of buffer calculations, and more generally buffers. So I'll start off, when I talk about the what, I'm going to look at a bit of context and look at how it fits into the overall scheme of things in terms of other features, and then I'll look at the why. So I'm going to go through a few different use cases, a few scenarios to show you why buffers are valuable or are of value, and then I'm going to go into Tableau and look at how to create buffers, and also and how to use them in visualizations. So in terms of the what, so before you think about, so in terms of, I want to think about a buffer before we think about the calculation. So in order to think about a buffer, you need to first have a location. So if we think about a location, I mentioned I'm in Dublin. So what we see on the screen here is a point on a map. So a point is basically a location on the Earth's surface. And once you have a point, you can have a buffer around it. So it's a boundary. So this white circle around the point, that's what a buffer is. So I'll continue on about what it is in a moment, but before I do that, I wanted to just set the scene in terms of the other features that have been released. So what you're seeing on the screen now is an overview of the features that have been released over the last 5 years. So this is a visualization that I have shared on Tableau Public. And what I've done, so for each feature, I've put it into one of the categories in the top right-hand corner. Now, obviously, some features would span two areas or multiple areas, but I've classified them as being in one of these 6 areas. So they're the colors that are used, and then every rectangle in the bottom part of the chart represents a feature. So at the very top, you can see that you've got 2020.2, which was released a couple of weeks ago. So 2020.1 was released in February. So I'm just going to click on that release, and on the right-hand side of the screen now, you can see the features that were part of that release. So generally, Tableau will have 3 kind of headline features that people get most excited about, and they're ones that kind of are shown first. So buffer calculations was one of those features from 2020.1, and it was, when it came out first, I mean, I didn't have any concept of what it was. So sometimes some features come and you might have been involved in the beta program, or have an idea. So this came out and I had no idea. So a shout out to Mark Reed and Craig Bloodworth, who both had content online and whose material I used and kind of inspired me for some of my examples. And as well, the other 2 features that were part of that release were dynamic parameters and viz animations. So I have the viz animations turned on in this workbook, so you might notice as my marks kind of transition. And then dynamic parameters, well, just a parameter is a placeholder for user input. So when they're dynamic, so it means there's less manual work. It means they'll update with your data. So then moving to 2020.2, so this is really hot off the press. The last couple of weeks this came out, and the headline features from this release were metrics, which allow you to really easily and consistently focus on your key performance metrics in your company. Relationships, so this is a really brand new approach to the data model in Tableau, and it's adding a logical layer to how your tables relate to one another, and I'll briefly touch on that towards the end. And set control. So sets were there previously, and set actions, and set control is allowing us users to interact in a more kind of intuitive and more familiar way with sets. So before I leave this slide, what I also want to do is I want to select, just zone in on the mapping features that have been released. So there are a number of mapping kind of modifications to the mapping functionality over the last year or two. Well, going back the last since the last 5 years, but if we just look at some of the more recent ones, because you'll see them at play here. So vector maps have really improved the visual, quality of the maps. In 2018.2, we had spatial joins. Spatial joins were introduced. So joins is where you combine two data sources, and a spatial join allows you to do that with spatial data, and I'll be incorporating that as part of my demo. Some other points to highlight: the make point function. So I spoke about the fact that you need a location for buffer. So if you don't have a location or the spatial field in your data, you can create one using the make point function. Other features to highlight: the distance function. So that allows you to calculate the distance between 2 points. So all quite relevant in the context of what we're going to be looking at now when we get to buffers. So buffers, there was the 2020.1, and above buffers you can see that in the latest release we had ESRI Web Data Connector and Oracle Spatial Support. So a lot of enhancements from a mapping perspective. So going back to the what, so we've said a buffer is a boundary around a point, and that point has to be a spatial field. So it has to be otherwise known as a geometry field. And if you don't have that in your data, you can use the make point function as long as you have a latitude and longitude. So you also need to think about a radius. So when you're drawing this buffer, what length do you want the radius to be? So this is an example of a radius of 2 kilometers, but you can also hard code that in if you wish. So you can either hard code it in, or you could use a parameter to make it dynamic. So I'll show you examples of that shortly. So you also need to stipulate what the unit of measure is. So do you want it to be kilometers or miles or meters or feet? So the 3 things to think about in summary are the location, the radius, and the units. Some other additional points to note. So the mark type that you use is the map. So it's not a circle, even though the visual it visually looks like a circle, but the mark type is a map. Dual axis charts can be used if you want to add other measures in with it, or if you want to add additional mark types. And then it just works like a normal mark. So you can add things to tooltip, color, labels, etc. And parameters used within the calculation allow flexibility. So you can change the length of the radius, for example. Just to say that some of the concepts, if you're an intermediate user of Tableau, you'll have come across some of the concepts that I'll be incorporating. Other than that, I'm assuming when I get into the how-to section, I'll be assuming a base level of Tableau knowledge. But that said, anybody should be able to kind of follow the scenarios and follow along with the examples. So why would you want to visualize your data in this way, or why would you want to use a buffer calculation? So I'm going to go through a few different scenarios and show you how a buffer calculation can be used to analyze, to answer questions you might have. The first question I'm posing is, where can I go? So we're all living in very strange times at the moment, and most of us find ourselves in some degree of lockdown. So up until recently in Ireland, you weren't allowed to exercise, for example, more than 2 kilometers away from your home. So very few people had a concept of what 2 kilometers from your home was. So visualizing it in the form of a way. So the white circle at the center of this visualization is a 2 kilometer buffer. And then a couple of weeks ago, that was changed to 5 kilometers. So that the turquoise circle there is a buffer with a 5 kilometer radius. And then because I'm using a parameter in that radius, I can change that to 20. So in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to go to 20 kilometers from our homes for exercise, and to potentially then, socialize from a social distancing perspective. So I'm looking forward to being able to hopefully see my parents-in-law. But seeing those, allowing that to be visualized allows you to see landmarks, to actually understand what that means. So that's one example. The next question is, which schools are in my area? So I recently moved house, and I wanted to I wanted to get a feel for what schools were in my area. So secondary schools is what I focused on. Now, my daughter is only just starting primary, hopefully in September. And I haven't moved that far away. So I had some concept of what schools were there, but I wanted to get the data to make sure I had a full list and to look at the different ethos of the schools. So I was lucky enough to find the data on the Department of Education site. So the data credit goes to them, and then they were subsequently able to provide me with the latitude and longitude coordinates for each of the schools. So I've mapped it out. So what you can see here is all of the different schools, all the different colours with the little location icons represent schools, and the different colours show the ethos. And what you can see is that I've got a white buffer showing a 5 kilometre radius. So I have a parameter so I can change it. If I wanted to change my parameter to 3 kilometres, I could add 3, and the circle size decreases. I also have a filter. So if I go to my radius filter, and I only look at those schools that are inside my radius, then my list is filtered, and I can just zone in on those schools that are going to be relevant for me and in the future. So what I've used for that filter is the distance function. So I've kind of done a comparison of my location and the distance of all the different schools, and seen and checked what's relevant for me. The next question is, which houses are close to schools? So if we think a bit kind of broader, take a broader case of where maybe if you were moving house and you wanted to you had a few different areas that you had in mind, but you wanted to see what what schools were available. And increasingly, it's found that when people are house hunting, this is something they really consider, especially so proximity to schools, and especially primary schools, can really have an impact on where people are going to move to. It can also have an impact on the price. So studies have been done to actually kind of try and quantify how much it would add to the price of a property if it's close to a primary school or a secondary school. So it's relevant, and it could be relevant even if you were selling a house, to see, okay, if there are a lot of schools in your area, you can be kind of feel comfortable about adding a few extra €1,000 or pounds, whatever the case may be. So to answer this question, I can't answer it from one data source. I need to bring two together. So I have schools on the left-hand side and houses on the right-hand side. So I'm going to look at an example now where you would need to do a spatial join. So I have data for all the schools. So what I'm showing on this view is each location of each school is represented. So that's the left side of my join. Now, if you're familiar with joining data, this idea that you'll have a data source on the left and one on the right should be very familiar with you, should be familiar to you. And what we're doing is we're kind of upping that now to a spatial level, where we're saying, well, where did these schools intersect with my 5 locations? So here I have 5 locations of 5 different houses. And if you could just imagine a buffer around each of these houses. So what I'm going to do is, by joining the 2 data sources, you can see where the schools fall within those buffer zones. So the result is that you can visualize everything then. Once you combine the data, you can show the schools and the buffers on the same, in the same view, and you can do some analysis. So that would be an example of a left join, and that's where you keep all of the data on the left and you incorporate in so you complement it with the additional data for the houses. You could also do an inner join, and this is just where there's an absolute match. So this allows you then to do some analysis. So what you could do at that point then is count how many schools are in each buffer, so that you can compare. And what you can, because a buffer is a mark type, you can you can quantify the number of schools, and you could also put that on color. So in this view, I'm using the distinct count of each of the schools, and I'm visually encoding then each buffer. So then you can see at a glance which which area is, has more schools available. And you could even remove the schools then from the view completely. I mean, so that you can just kind of look at the color of the buffer and have that inform you. Now, I only have 5 marks on this view, but you can imagine if you had more marks, how that would be even more beneficial. So next up we have, so in this example, what I'm doing is I'm using a set. So I'm putting my houses into a set and using that to color the marks. Now this is the new set control feature. So if I click on the drop down, I can choose which houses to include or exclude from my analysis, from the set. So anything that's orange is in my set. So you could use that as a kind of a process of elimination, and then to kind of, if you're focusing your analysis. So how do you create these? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Tableau workbook. I'll click on I'm going to go out of presentation mode and click on the worksheet. So what you can see here is I'm going to start with the simplest example, where you just have one location and one buffer. So what you see on detail on the marks card is I have a field called my 2K buffer, and the aggregation is the collect. So when you have spatial data, it's collected, and that's the method of aggregation. So Tableau always aggregates, but so instead of summing like we would do a normal other measures, we're collecting the spatial data. And let's go. I'm going to zoom in on the data pane, so you can see that I have a calculated field called my 2K buffer, and I also have a calculated field for my location. So there were 3 things that I said you needed for a buffer, and that was the location, the radius, and the units. So first of all, the location. Let's look at how I have defined that. So I'm going to right click to edit my location, and if we zoom in, so what you see is I'm using the make point function that I mentioned earlier, and I'm taking in a latitude and a longitude. Now these are purple, which means they're parameters. So rather than hard coding in a latitude and longitude, I'm using parameters so that it's dynamic. So that's my location. And you can see that over in the right-hand corner of the screen, this is where you can key in the different parameters. So I could change the latitude and longitude coordinates, and the buffer would be redrawn elsewhere on the map. So that's the location piece. And now if we right click and I'll edit, I'm just going to go in to show you my 2K buffer. So it's using the buffer function, which takes in those 3 things that I mentioned. It's taking in a location, it's taking in the number 2, and it's taking in kilometers. So, so that's the calculation that we have on detail. And what you can see is then we have as well the map mark type. So that's the first example. We'll go into another example now. So what I'm going to look at now is the case where I had the 5 different houses and I'd drawn a buffer around each house. So if we view the data, you can see that I've got 5 different addresses, and for each address I have a latitude and a longitude coordinate. So we'll go over to the data pane. Also, you might notice, so I'm working in 2020.2, so the data pane has changed quite a bit. You no longer see dimensions and measures explicitly called out. Your dimensions and measures are separated by this subtle grey line. So once again, I'm just going to go into my calculations. So you can see a house location calculation and a house buffer. So if I right click, I'll go in, and you can see that I have used, once again, the make point function to take in the latitude and longitude. And if I right click and I look at my house buffer, once again, calling the buffer calculation to take in the house location, the number 2, and the kilometers. So I can drag house location now onto detail, and Tableau draws those buffers. So it starts off by just drawing one mark type, one mark. So you can see that as I click on this, the whole thing is highlighted. So I need to give it more detail in order to split out each circle. So I need to drag ID onto detail, and now it will draw each buffer. So that's the kind of showing, that's just the basic buffer. But what I'm going to get to now is the spatial join. So a real value in being able to spatially see where regions intersect with each other. So I'm going to, once again, so to start off, so I talked about the way we're going to join up the schools on the left with the houses on the right. So I want to, first of all, look at the schools on their own. So I'm going to just plot the actual schools. So for each school, I've got a location. So we've got a latitude and a longitude for each, a location made out of the latitude and longitude for each school. So I can drag that onto detail and it will plot each school. And I need to bring on, once again, a unique identifier so that they're separated out. So I'll bring on a roll ID, which is, or a roll number, which is a separate, a unique identifier for each school. So they're the two pieces that I'm now going to bring together. So I've got the schools on the one hand and the buffers on the other side. So I'm going to do this. So I've already kind of started off the worksheet and I'm going to bring the two together. Sorry, so we've got the data source here. So if we just look in how the spatial join was calculated, I'm going to go to my data source and I'll double click in. Just to mention before I do that actually, so this is the relationships interface when you are in the data source window. So this is the logical layer and you need to double click in to see your physical tables. So on the left, I have my school listing, and on the right, I have my houses. So let's look at how this spatial join is done. So normally with normal zooming, you have a linking field, as I said. So in this case, we're going to need to be linking on spatial objects. So if I click on my join icon, on the left, if we just go to edit my calculation, so we'll go to edit the calculation. So for the schools, we want to just get the location for each school. So we want to say make point, latitude and longitude. And then for the side on the right, we want to get our buffers. So we've got a buffer for each house. So we've got to make, and I'm using the buffer calculation in this case is kind of nesting around the make point function instead of calling it out separately because it all needs to be done within the calculation. So that's the join. And if we go back to the view now, so what we can do in this case now is we can add add everything into the view. So what I want to do, I mentioned a dual axis. Now, if you might have encountered this if you're at kind of a beginner level. A dual axis where you have multiple axes and then you make them kind of, you allow marks then to overlap. So I need to hold down Control to make a copy of my latitude field. And then for my first axis, I'm going to remove my school locations and I'm going to add the calculation, which gives me the house buffer. So if I search for my house, I've got a calculation house buffer. I'll just quickly look at it again, just to remind you. So this buffer is taking in the house location and it's the number 2 and the kilometers. So what I can do now is I can drop that onto detail. So now I've got the two instances. I'm just going to make it yellow so that it's very clear what's happening. And if I right click now, I can create a dual axis chart. And that allows me to see that to match everything up. I could go back, if I go back to my data source, so what this is a left join because I still have all the schools. If I wanted to isolate those ones in the others, I can go back in and I can change it to an inner join. And now if we go back to the example here, now it's just showing where there's an overlap between the houses. And that allows you then to do analysis to kind of count how many schools are in each buffer. And we can see, so for example, if I wanted to count how many schools are in each area, I can right click to bring in count each distinct roll number. So I'm just counting each school. The roll number just stands for a school. Now what I haven't done yet here is I haven't brought in a unique identifier to distinguish each house buffer. So I need to drag in my ID there. So just to say, and this example was inspired by an example I saw from Mark Reed. where he looked at trade analysis. So you could equally see how, you know, it might be interesting to look at where your competitors are. So this is obviously schools data, but looking at where your competitors are based, maybe you want to locate yourself close to them or not. So that's the example. So what I wanted to say as well, I'm going to make this workbook available on Tableau Public. And there was one other case that I just wanted to explore. Can I just apologize as well? So I had my chat disappeared. Jordan, I'm not sure if I've missed your warning, and I started my I started my timer a bit late. So I'll finish up now by just saying thank you all very much, and I will be so my workbook, all of these scenarios will be up on my Tableau Public profile, so you can check them out if you want to look at them in more detail. And thanks everybody. So yeah, I'll take any questions now if there are any, Sarah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Louise. That was an absolutely fantastic presentation. Everybody in the chat was like going crazy, saying how good it was. And yeah, it's really helped me trying to get my head around like the buffer calculation, which I know in itself is quite simple, but it's the join that can be like the complex part kind of to understand how it works.
Yeah, thanks.
There's a few questions in the chat. I'll just ask you one directly. So do you know if there's any impact on performance of using the buffer calculation? So Diego has said that sometimes he found maps are not very efficient in performance. So I don't know if you've got any tips around improving performance, or specifically if the buffer calculation impacts that at all, if you've noticed.
Not that I've noticed, I have to say. So I haven't been working with huge data sets. So I would say that, you know, the schools data I had 700 rows, you know, so, but I haven't noticed anything on that front. And it's something you could look into, you know. There are always so many factors when it comes to performance, but I mean, it is just a mark type. Obviously it's a calculation, and if you've got lots of rows of data, calculations can be resource heavy, but I think it would depend.
Yeah.
Okay,
great.
Thanks,
thank you.
Okay, thanks a million.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so our next speaker is Heidi. Let me just share my screen. Oops. So Heidi is a business intelligence consultant with the Information Lab in Deutschland. She's been using Tableau for 3 years and is probably one of the most passionate Tableau users that I know. So Heidi just shines in the community for her passion for the product. And in Heidi's own words, she said the only thing that she loves more than Tableau are alpacas. So today Heidi's going to be showing us 20 tips in 20 minutes in Tableau. Over to you, Heidi.
Thank you, Sarah. I will share my screen now. And there we go. All right. Thank you for the short intro. Yes, I'm Heidi Kalber. I work as a BI consultant with the Information Lab in Germany. And over the past 3 years, I've picked up a number of tips in Tableau that I would love to share with you. Now, to be honest, when I was practicing this talk, it was almost always slightly above 20 minutes, and there will be a bonus tip at the end. But to be honest, 21 tips in 23 minutes just isn't as catchy a title. One word in advance, please do yourself the favor and do not try to take notes while I show you my tips, and do not try to click along in Tableau, because chances are that you will miss every other tip or even more. What I can do for you is I promise to have all these tips in my blog at some point, which you will find at queenofdata.net. I will do my best to have it up next week. And if not, rest assured in the knowledge that this talk is being recorded, so you can all watch it with all the time in the world afterwards. So without further ado, I'll just get started. So tips number 1 and 2 are about formatting. I have this little view which looks at the amount of time it takes to do your taxes compared to 2011. And we can see I have different numbers in here. So in Mongolia, same time, more time in Myanmar, and in Russia, it takes you less time. But I want this to be very, very obvious. And for that, I want to have triangles that make it even more obvious than it already is. So what do? I format this field, and I can add signs in here. So you can see this is my positive, this is my negative numbers, and I just choose any kind of search engine that you want to do, and I look for UTF-8 triangles. UTF-8 is a library of signs that you can use, characters, and I just look for a triangle in here, go back to Tableau and add this in the very front. And I do the same thing with a downward triangle for my negative numbers. So same thing, add this in here. And now we can see we have a downward triangle for negative numbers and the upward triangle for positive numbers. Let's add in a plus here as well, just to make very obvious that it's a positive number. But the thing is, looking at countries that have plus minus 0, I get this upward triangle and a plus, and I don't want that. So what can I do? I just Google the plus minus sign, because I don't know how to do that. Copy it anywhere, and I can actually add in a third option in here, which will be plus minus 0. So the first part is for positive numbers, second part for negative, and the third part for plus minus 0. Now that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is maybe I don't want to have numbers here. I don't care by how much I save time or how much more time it costs me. I just want to know less time, more time, or same amount of time. And I can do that. I could, for example, do a calculated field, but that's too much of a hassle. So I just format that as well. So I go back in here, delete all of this and say more time or less time or same time. And now that will stick depending on what kind of value I have. Now, I guess everybody who has worked with Tableau has at some point in their Tableau experience created a word cloud or a bubble chart. And bubble charts are those differently sized circles. Wouldn't it be fun to, instead of circles, have actual symbols, depending on what kind of bubble that is? Or we can't quite do that yet, as far as I'm aware, but we can do something almost as good. And for that, I again rely on UTF-8 signs, and I try to find any kind of picture. And then you will find these little icons, and you can see these are all just simple characters, and maybe they are able to symbolize whatever you're trying to show. And what I've done here is I've actually duplicated my sector field, and I've changed the aliases. So for example, I've used these musical notes for entertainment, and I'll just put this on text and get rid of the sector. And now I kind of have a bubble chart with symbols, closest thing we can get. Next one, I want to label my bars. So what I can do is I can label the start of my bar, and I can label the outside end of my bar. But what if I want to label the inside end of my bar? Well, I can do that by simply hitting Control and dragging this to the right. So duplicating my axis, and then I make this a Gantt bar. And then I just label this Gantt bar. And not on the right-hand side, but instead on the left. And you can probably see where we're going with this. I just make this a dual axis, very important, don't forget to synchronize. Get rid of this header up here, we don't actually need that. And now I've labeled the inside end of my bar. Maybe I want to label underneath the bar, well, I can do that as well. Let's just add a reference line using the value, don't need a tooltip, make that per cell. I don't need the line either. And now you can see we have these values, and when I format, I can say I want this on the left-hand side and have it underneath, or even on top of the bar, depending on what you want. And now I've labeled at the end of the bar, on top or underneath. Next one, maybe you've used the Pages feature in Tableau before. The Pages feature helps you show different aspects of the same data, and I want to export that to PDF for any kind of reason. So what I can do is I go to File, Print to PDF, hit OK. But what happens now is this will only print this one page that we were looking at. So looking at the resulting Adobe PDF file, and here we go. We can see this only has one page, which is currently Europe, because that's the Tableau page I was looking at. But what I actually want is I want a PDF file with one page per Tableau page. So what do we have to do for that? We go to File and to Page Setup. And at the very bottom here, we can see Pages Shelf. And currently, it's only showing the current page. So if we want to show all pages, that's just what we have to select. hit OK, and if I print to PDF now, yep, and save this, and yes, I want to overwrite, then the resulting PDF file is going to have 6 pages, 1 per world region, and we can see I can just leaf right through this. Now, sometimes when we create calculated fields, we are not quite certain on how they will turn out, or maybe we're still working on the calculation, and sometimes we will have comments in here. So for example, currently I'm looking at the difference in days, but maybe I want to have it in hours instead. So I can easily add 2 slashes up here, and I want to get rid of all of these slashes, but not all of the text behind that. So do I have to go through every single row and delete these 2 signs? No, I do not. I can simply hit my Alt key and then highlight these characters underneath each other, get rid of them, and now I have the difference in hours. I've created a donut chart here, and for that I need 2 helper axes. So I'll have these options of min0 and min02, and let's face it, this is a bit confusing, so I want to give them proper names, but I don't necessarily want to persist them. So what can I do? I just double click on the field, go to the first position, add in 2 slashes and call this one though, add in a line break, and we can see this is being renamed up in the columns container in my marks card and on the axis title. And same thing for the other one, we can call this one whole, and now I can easily distinguish between my 2 axes. One additional benefit of this is tip number 9. When I persist this field now, I don't need to rename. Tableau simply grabs the comments that I added in the ad hoc calculation. One of the biggest discussions in the database community is, are we allowed to truncate axes? So one easy thing to remember is, if you're showing bar charts, do not ever truncate your axes. But with line charts, which way do we go? So we can see here, these values are pretty close to each other, 54% to 44%, so it's not as varied as it could be, and I don't want to make that decision for the end user, so I want them to decide for themselves. How can I do that? I simply add a parameter, which is called zoom axis with a question mark, so that the user knows they can actually do something here, and call this one yes or no, make it very obvious. And we can show this parameter. Now, the parameter in and of itself, of course, doesn't do anything. So we need a calculated field here. And we will call this 0 line. And if I have my zoom axis yes, then I want this to be null. And you will see why in a moment. Else, I want this to be 0. And we hit OK, add this to detail, and add in a reference line. And this one will be the 0 line. We do not want to see a value, don't need a tooltip, and we don't actually need a line, but I will give you one anyway, just so that you can see what's going on. And currently, we are not showing the 0 line because the zoom axis parameter is on yes. But if I go to no, then you can see this 0 line is being added. And why is that important? Now, I go to my axis, and I want to leave this automatic. I don't want to fix the range. This should be flexible, but I do not want to include 0. So if I don't do that, it's still including 0 because it's currently showing the 0 line. But if I don't want to do that, if I want to zoom my axis, the 0 line vanishes and we zoom in. So all that's left to do is actually make this line invisible. And then you're done and you have your little zoom parameter, just as we need it. Now, I have this map here, and all these countries have a tooltip, and I want to be able to shade the tooltip. So I want the tooltip to have the same color as that world region. What can I do? I can create an extra sheet and add in a helper axis in here, fix this one, come on, fix it to 1, get rid of this header and get rid of the other header as well. We don't need that anymore. We want these bars to be the maximum size, and we actually want this to fit the entire view, which looks kind of horrible, but don't worry about that. Don't need it as opaque. And if I go back here, I can now edit the tooltip. I don't need any kind of text. That's all in the other sheet. So I just add this sheet that I just created in here, make it the perfect size, And now we can see these tooltips are shaded in the color of the country or of the world region we're looking at. Maybe if I want to use my corporate identity colors, I have a custom color palette and I have that in Tableau. But if I want to give all these bars one of my corporate identity colors, I don't really easily find this here. So it's not in these optional colors. And let's face it, not all of us know OSDI HTML codes by heart. I certainly don't. So what can I do? I simply add an ad hoc calculation, can be anything really, put this on color, and then I can edit colors and access my corporate color palette and can give it this beautiful dark purple. And that's my CI color, and there we go. When I'm looking at historical numbers, so in this case, energy usage over time, maybe I want to be able to spot the historical highs. So for example, 2003 was the highest energy usage up until 2003, as was 2004 up until 2004. 2005 was not a historical high. And I want to be able to easily color that. So what do? I add a calculation, and in here I just want to know, was the sum of energy usage the same as the running max of the sum of energy usage? Come on, there we go. And I can easily put this on color, change the colors a bit, and we can easily see these lighter gray bars are just normal years, and all the darker gray bars are historical highs. We're going to reuse this later, so hence the colors. Now, maybe I want to use a geographical field, which is not a geographical field yet. So looking at country, we know this from earlier, I maybe am interested in the regions of the world. And I can create a map out of this. So I want one field for Europe, one field for the Americas, etc. But if I now drag off country, Tableau will tell me 6 nulls, because region itself is just a string field. So what can I do? I can assign a geographical role, but we don't have world region in here. So I have to create that from country. Just create from a lower geographical dimension, and Tableau will compute that and give us the resulting world map. Just give it a second. And here we go. So now we can see we have one field for Europe and we have one field for the Americas, etc. Now, maybe I want to color the seas. Maybe I want to give the seas a very bright yellow for whatever reason. What we used to do was we took map layers and we can change it to black, or we can change it to blue, but there's no option to make it bright yellow without using an external map client. So what can I do? I can remove the base and then just go to format the shading, and I can shade the worksheet. So I just make the worksheet bright yellow, and then my seas are bright yellow as well. Sometimes we want to have colorful dashboards, but we know that some end users will end up printing them. And for that, they need to have as much white as possible. So I just added in a button here in order to make it colorful or make it white again. What's hidden behind this button? This is just a show hide button. And I actually have a sheet that is just green. That's all it is. And I use this show hide button to show or hide the fields behind my diagram. Maybe I don't want the user to be limited to just one color. Maybe I want them to give many options of the colors of the rainbow. So I have created a color picker here, which is just a glorified pie chart without any kind of purpose. So these sectors don't mean anything. And I have a sheet, which is currently just the tree map. And we can see I have created a set, which I put on filter here. So this only keeps the colors in the set. And that's basically all I have to do. So I have my tree map in the background, which looks awful for the moment, but will come into play in a moment. And I have this color picker. So I just need to assign a set action. Add an action, change the set values, only originating from the color picker using a hover action. I want this to affect the color set, and I want to keep the set values. Hit OK. And when I hover over this, I can easily change the color of the background of my dashboard. Now, maybe users don't really understand what they're supposed to do here, so it often helps to give them a tiny info button. And I want to have an informative overlay that gives them instructions on how to interact with the dashboard. And for that, I simply copy the image, so take a screenshot of my dashboard and go to any kind of layouting program that you like. Personally, the only one I know is PowerPoint, so that's what I use. Insert this here, and then I've already done that. You can add any kind of icons that you want, move them around, use them to indicate whatever the user is supposed to do. And then it helps me personally to add in this kind of border, just to know how these items should be in relation to the dashboard content. And then just right click and save this as a graph. Remember, do not save the screenshot. And then you can go to Tableau and add this as a hovering or a floating image. And then again, use a show height button. So this is just a show or height button that gives helpful instructions to the end user. Now, remember that we used a hover action in here, and that can be really confusing because maybe the user wants to pick the color green, but then they remove the mouse and suddenly the background is orange. So it would be better to have a select action in here, and we can easily change that. But the issue with select actions is that when you select, all the other options are grayed out. And maybe we don't want that. We want to always see the full color wheel. What can we do? We just go in here and we create a calculated field, which we call deselect. Again, it doesn't really matter what's in here as long as it's the same for every row of our data. And why is that important? We just put that to select, to detail, sorry. And then I can add in a highlight action. Now, this should only affect the color picker, and it should only affect the deselect field, which means that this field, which is behind every slice of this pie, will be highlighted. So no matter which one I pick, all the others will be highlighted as well, meaning nothing is grayed out. Now, for the last two tips, sometimes you have objects and you want to move them around. So what you can do is you can use the arrow keys of your dashboard, but this is really slow. But you can use the shift and arrow key, and then they move very, very fast. So you can easily shift things around, literally. And one additional tip, the bonus tip I promised you at the beginning, what if you want to give your dashboard developers a hint, but this dashboard is already in production or already being tested by end users, and you don't want the end users to see the hint? Well, you can add in a floating text object and add in here a very important hint for developers, not end users. Now, of course, if you leave it in the middle of the dashboard, this will be easily visible. So you maybe want it outside the dashboard, but if you just drag it with the mouse, this will vanish. Tableau will throw it off the dashboard. So what can we do? We use, again, the shift and arrow keys and just move it to the very edge. But if you want to be very certain to have it outside, you can easily go to layout and make this outside the dashboard. And then the end users will never be able to see it, but every developer who goes into Tableau Desktop will see the hint and learn whatever you wanted to tell them. And that was my 21 tips. So this is the end of my talk. If you want to connect, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, or find my work on Tableau Public or on Instagram. And again, I will do my best to have this talk up by next week on my blog. And I would love it if any of you came around to our Dark Data virtual event for Data Plus Women Germany. This is the link. Hope to see you next Thursday. Thank you for your attention and have fun trying out these tips.
Thank you so much, Heidi. That was amazing. You just whizzed through all those tips in a really short period of time. Or the chat was just like, wow, 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 this is amazing. I really love the zoom in on, like, so you could take away the zero line and then just zoom in and zoom out. I thought that was really, really cool. And also the last one that you showed where you can add like a little like passage for developers. I just never thought of doing that before, but it's so handy. We don't actually have any questions. I think everyone's so blown away that you've covered it all really well. And I think with the workbook that you're going to upload, it'll be super helpful, so anyone can then go back and then rewatch your talk with that workbook as they go. So yeah, you're off the hook. There may be some questions that come in as I'm speaking now, so just monitor the Q&A. But other than that, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, let me just share my screen one more time. Okay, so our next event will be a week commencing June the 15th. So we're now going to go down to events every once a month. We don't have a date set for this one yet, so I can't give you this specific date, but it will be at some point in the week commencing June the 15th. We also have another special APAC event, so this one will be on June the 11th. The time hasn't been confirmed yet, but it's going to be aligned to APAC. So I know we haven't really been catering for that region very well in the other timings for our events. So this is a special one-off APAC event just for people in that region. And now, before you all go, I'd like to invite you to join us for some virtual networking and an informal chat over on the there's a platform that the Information Lab have provided, and we go on there and have an informal chat. We call it like the community coffee. If you want to join us on there, we're going to go and head over there now, as well as some of the speakers will be on there too. If you want to join, just follow the link on the screen, and you'll just have to put in a few details, and then you can join us right there. It's almost like a big meeting room where you can pick tables and chat to different people. But yeah, feel free to come over there and join us and continue the conversation. So thank you everyone for joining today. Really appreciate the speakers for coming along to speak with us, and for everyone that's joined in live. We look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.